I was writing in my notebook when she walked into my room without knocking. "Olivia, can I borrow that pen?" Elena didn't wait for my answer. Her hand was already reaching across my desk, fingers closing around the slender gold barrel I'd saved 3 months of allowance to buy. "I have calculus notes to finish." I looked up at her, my older sister, the one who never had to save for anything because Dad always said yes before she finished asking. "That's my... thanks." She was already walking out, the pen disappearing into the pocket of her designer jeans. I stared at the empty space on my desk where it had been sitting. The pen I'd researched for weeks, comparing models and prices, finally choosing the Montblanc Meisterstück because it wrote like silk and felt substantial in my hand. The pen I used to journal every night, to write the poetry I never showed anyone, to draft the college application essays I was working on in secret because Mum said I should just go to the state school where Elena went. "Elena, I need that back." I followed her to her room. "It's expensive and I use it every day." She was already sitting at her desk uncapping it. "Relax, I'll give it back when I'm done." She started writing, and I watched the gold nib glide across her notebook page. Calculus formulas, things she could have written with any ballpoint pen. "When will that be?" "I don't know, Olivia. God, why are you being so precious about a pen? It's not like I'm stealing it." She didn't look up. "Mum said you need to help with dinner anyway." I stood in her doorway for a moment longer, watching her use my pen, like it was nothing special. Just another tool she was entitled to borrow. The same way she borrowed my sweaters and returned them stretched. The same way she borrowed my earbuds and gave them back with a broken wire. The same way she borrowed my time, my space, my things, and never thought about whether I minded because nobody ever told her she couldn't. I went downstairs. Mum was already in the kitchen, pulling vegetables from the refrigerator. "Can you start chopping these? Elena has a lot of studying to do." "I was studying too." "You can study after dinner." Mum handed me a knife and cutting board. "Elena's taking advanced courses. Her GPA matters right now." I took the knife. I didn't say that my GPA mattered too, that I was taking AP classes, that I had my own work to do. I'd learned years ago that saying these things only made Mum's face tighten with disappointment, as if I was being competitive instead of asking for basic fairness. Dad came home while I was dicing onions. He kissed Mum's cheek, called out a hello to Elena upstairs, and glanced at me. "How was school, Liv?" "Fine." He nodded and disappeared into his office. That night, after dinner and dishes and helping Elena find a book she needed for tomorrow, I went back to my room. My desk still felt wrong without the pen. I had other pens, cheap ones, but they weren't the same. Writing with them felt hollow, like speaking in a voice that wasn't quite mine. I tried to journal anyway, using a blue bic I'd found in my backpack. The words came out jagged and resentful. I wrote about the pen, about Elena, about the way I always came second in a family of 3 children where I was the middle one who somehow became invisible. When I knocked on Elena's door an hour later, she groaned. "What?" "Can I have my pen back now?" "I'm still using it." "It's been 3 hours." "And I'm still using it." She said each word like I was stupid. "I'll give it back tomorrow." Tomorrow came. She didn't give it back. When I asked, she said she'd left it at school. When I asked the day after that, she said she couldn't find it. By the end of the week, she said, "Olivia, I don't know where it is. Okay, Jesus, I'll buy you a new one." She never did. I felt the loss of that pen, like a physical thing. Not because it was expensive, though it was. Not because it was beautiful, though it was that too. But because it was mine. The one thing I'd chosen carefully and bought with my own money and treasured. And she'd taken it like it meant nothing. Mum said I was being dramatic when I mentioned it. Dad said these things happen. Elena said she was sorry, but rolled her eyes when she thought I wasn't looking. I stopped asking. The semester continued. Elena got early acceptance to her first choice law school. There was a celebration dinner at the expensive restaurant downtown, the one with white tablecloths and a wait list. I wore the dress Elena had borrowed and never returned, the one that looked better on her anyway, according to Mum. I ordered the cheapest pasta on the menu while Elena got filet mignon. To Elena, Dad raised his glass. We're so proud of you. I lifted my water glass and drank. That night, I stayed up late working on my own college applications. I was applying to schools nobody in my family knew I was considering. Schools far away. Schools with strong, creative writing programs. Schools where nobody would know me as Elena's little sister. I wrote my personal statement with a black ballpoint pen that kept skipping. I wrote about finding your own voice in a world that wants you to echo someone else's. I didn't mention the pen. I didn't mention Elena, but the absence was there in every word. Winter came. Elena graduated with honours and moved back home to study for the LSAT. She took over the dining room table with her prep books and practice tests. I did homework in my room. She complained about the stress. Mum brought her tea and told me to be quiet when I walked past. When my younger brother David came home from middle school complaining about a group project, Elena told him he needed to learn to work with difficult people. When I came home with the same complaint a week later, she told me I was being too sensitive. The pattern was everywhere once I started seeing it. At Thanksgiving, when Aunt Rachel asked about our plans, Elena talked for 20 minutes about law school. When Aunt Rachel turned to me and asked about my interests, Mum interrupted to refill coffee cups and the moment passed. At Christmas, Elena received a laptop and a designer bag. I received books and a gift card. Dad said they'd spent the same amount, but I'd done the math. I hadn't. I stopped expecting equity. I started expecting nothing. I got my acceptance letters in March. Full scholarship to a university 8 states away. I didn't tell anyone at first. I just sat on my bed and read the email over and over, feeling something unlock in my chest. When I finally told them at dinner, there was a pause. That's very far away, Mum said. It's a good school, I said. The state school is good too, Elena said, and you'd save money on housing. I have a full scholarship. Another pause. Well, Dad said finally, congratulations, Liv. The word felt thin, polite, nothing like the celebration Elena had gotten. David hugged me and said it was cool. Elena went back to her phone. Mum asked if I'd thought about what this would mean for family holidays. I said thank you and cleared my plate. The weeks before graduation were strange. I moved through them like a ghost, already half gone. I attended the senior awards ceremony and watched Elena, who'd been invited back as an alumna, receive recognition for her achievements. When they called my name for the Creative Writing Award, the applause felt scattered and brief. Elena hugged me afterward. See, you're doing great. You don't need to go so far away to prove anything. I hadn't said I was trying to prove anything, but she'd heard it anyway. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about the pen and the dress and every small theft that had taught me I didn't matter as much. I thought about leaving, about finally having space to breathe, about becoming someone they couldn't overlook. My chest felt heavy. The air in my room felt thick. I tried to take a deep breath and couldn't quite manage it. I thought about tomorrow, graduation practice, the ceremony, the party Mum was planning that would somehow centre around Elena's law school plans. I thought about next week, packing, saying goodbye to the few friends I'd managed to keep despite always being busy with family obligations. I thought about next month, freedom, distance, myself. I thought about these things until I didn't think about anything at all. The tiredness came suddenly, not sleepiness, but something heavier. My limbs felt distant, my breathing slowed. I tried to sit up and couldn't. The ceiling blurred. I remember thinking, this is wrong. I remember the weight in my chest growing. I remember the room getting darker even though the lamp was still on. I remember nothing. When I opened my eyes, I was 14 years old and sitting at my desk with a pen in my hand. Not just any pen. The Montblanc. The gold barrel gleaming under my desk lamp, the nib poised above a fresh page in my journal. I stared at it. My hand was smaller. The desk was arranged differently. My walls had posters I'd taken down sophomore year. I stood up and looked in the mirror. My face was younger, rounder. I was wearing the pajamas I donated to Goodwill when I was 15. My door was open. I could hear Mum downstairs talking on the phone. I could hear Elena's music from her room. The same playlist she'd played on loop the summer before her junior year. I could hear David playing video games in the living room, the sounds he'd eventually stopped making when he got too cool for gaming at home. I sat back down slowly. I knew what this was. Not logically, not in any way that made sense, but with a certainty that went deeper than thought. I had died, somehow, and I had come back. The journal page in front of me was dated 3 years earlier. I was 14, Elena was 16, David was 12. Everything that had happened, every small cruelty and large indifference hadn't happened yet, but I remembered. Every dinner where I'd served and cleared while Elena studied, every celebration that had centered her, every time my accomplishments had been footnotes to her achievements, every borrowed item never returned, every boundary I'd failed to set because I didn't know I was allowed to have any. I picked up the pen and wrote one sentence. I will not let this happen again. The ink flowed perfect and smooth. I capped the pen and put it in my desk drawer, not on top where it could be seen. In the drawer, under some notebooks, in a pencil case I zipped closed. Hidden. When Elena walked into my room the next morning without knocking, I was already awake. Olivia, can I borrow? She paused, scanning my desk. Do you have a pen I can use? I ran out of ink. There's a pack of ballpoints in the kitchen drawer, I said without looking up from my book. Help yourself. Don't you have something nicer? I have calculus notes. Just the cheap ones. I turned a page. Sorry. She stood there for a moment, waiting for me to offer something else. I didn't. Finally, she left. I heard her rummaging in the kitchen, heard her sigh of frustration when she found only the basic pens, heard her footsteps going back upstairs. I went back to reading, but my heart was racing. That small act of refusal felt enormous, revolutionary, like I'd shifted the axis of my world by a single degree. This version of my life had a different rhythm. I noticed it in the days that followed. I noticed it in the way I moved through the house like water. Present, but untouchable. I didn't volunteer for extra chores. I didn't rush to help Elena find her things. I didn't make myself smaller to give her space. When Mum asked me to help with dinner so Elena could study, I said, I have studying too. We can both help, or we can both study. Mum blinked. Elena has advanced classes. So do I. There was a long pause. Mum's mouth opened, then closed. She wasn't used to this version of me, the one who didn't apologize for existing. Fine, she said finally. You both study. I'll manage. Elena appeared in the kitchen anyway 10 minutes later. I can help, Mum. I needed a break. Mum smiled at her. That's sweet of you, honey. But I noticed the way Mum glanced at me, something uncertain in her expression, like she was recalculating an equation she thought was solved. I went back to my room. That weekend, I used some birthday money I'd been saving, money I had spent on the Montblanc the first time, and bought a different pen, not as expensive. A Lamy Safari, sleek and professional, that wrote beautifully but didn't cost 3 months of allowance. I used it openly. I took notes with it at school. I wrote in my journal with it at night. I let it sit on my desk. 2 weeks later, Elena noticed it. That's a nice pen, she said, picking it up without asking. Thank you. I took it from her hand, gently but firmly. It's my favourite. Can I try it? I'd rather you didn't. I'm particular about my things. She laughed like I'd made a joke. Since when? Since always. I put the pen back in my notebook and closed it. There are pens in the kitchen if you need one. Her smile faded. You're being weird. I'm being clear. She left without another word, and I felt something settle in my chest. Not anger, not satisfaction, just calm. The months passed. I kept my boundaries like a garden wall, consistent and unapologetic. I didn't lend my clothes. I didn't give up my time. I didn't make myself convenient. At first, they thought I was going through a phase. Mum mentioned it to Dad when she thought I couldn't hear. Olivia's been very independent lately. She's 14, Dad said. It's normal. It's different, though. She used to be so helpful. She still helps. She just doesn't drop everything anymore. There was a pause. Then Mum said quietly, I think I might have been taking her for granted. I stood in the hallway, barely breathing, waiting for Dad's response. Maybe, he said, but she seems happy. Happier, even. That conversation changed something. Mum started noticing me more, asking about my day with actual curiosity, checking if I needed anything instead of assuming I was fine. It wasn't perfect. She still favoured Elena in small, unconscious ways, but the gap was narrowing. Dad started asking me about school with actual interest, what I was reading, what I thought about my classes, whether I needed help with anything. David, who I'd barely interacted with in my first life because I'd been too busy managing everyone else's needs, started hanging around my room. We discovered we both liked the same music, started watching shows together, became something close to friends. Elena stopped walking into my room without permission. At first, because I'd started locking the door. Then, because she started knocking. I wasn't rude, I wasn't cold. I was simply unavailable for the role I'd played before. When Elena got her acceptance to law school this time, we celebrated at the same restaurant, but I ordered what I wanted. I wore a dress I'd bought myself, one she'd never touched. I met Dad's toast with genuine happiness for her success. To Elena, Dad said, raising his glass. Then he turned to me. And to Olivia, who got straight A's this semester. We're proud of both of you. It was a small thing, but I felt it like sunlight. You've been different lately, Elena said later when we were waiting for dessert. More, I don't know, confident? Maybe I just decided to take up space, I said. She looked at me oddly but didn't respond. The seasons changed. Summer came and went. I got a job at a bookstore, saved my money, bought things I wanted instead of things I thought I should want. I started writing more seriously, submitting poems to online journals. I got rejections, then acceptances. Small victories that belonged only to me. Sophomore year started. Junior year, I took AP classes and joined the literary magazine and made friends who didn't know Elena, who saw me first. When college applications came around, I applied to the same schools I had before. But this time, when I talked about them at dinner, everyone listened. 8 states away, Mum said, but her tone was different, wistful instead of disapproving. You've really thought about this. I have. It's a great program, Dad said. He'd actually researched it this time, asked me questions, engaged with my choice. Expensive, though. I'm applying for scholarships. I have a good chance. Elena was quieter. She'd gotten into law school again, same school, but the celebration had been shared this time. A dinner for both of us, acknowledging both achievements. She'd seemed surprised by that. Pleased, but surprised. That spring, my college acceptance letters came again. The same scholarship. The same school 8 states away. This time, when I told them at dinner, Mum's face showed a surprise, but something else too. Something like respect. That's incredible, Olivia, she said. Full scholarship? Full scholarship. Really far away, though, Elena said, but her voice was softer than before, less dismissive, almost sad. "That's the point," I said and smiled. Dad asked questions about the program, the campus, what I'd study, real questions. We talked for an hour. David asked if he could visit. Elena asked if I was scared. A little, I admitted, but also excited. "You'll be great," Elena said, and she meant it. I went to bed that night feeling whole in a way I'd never felt the first time. Not because everything was perfect, but because I'd built something real, something that honoured who I actually was. The summer before college was different too. I wasn't frantically preparing to escape. I was preparing to explore. I spent time with David, teaching him things I'd learned. I had actual conversation with Elena about her fears about law school, her hopes for her career. I helped Mum in the kitchen because I wanted to, not because I had to. And through it all, I wrote. With my Lamy safari during the day, with my Montblanc at night, pulling it from its hiding place to journal about this strange second chance I'd been given. I was packing for college when Elena came to my room. Actually knocked, this time before entering. "Hey," she said, "can I talk to you?" "Sure." She sat on my bed, watching me fold clothes. "I've been thinking about something." "Okay." "Do you remember a few years ago when I asked to borrow a pen and you said no?" My hands stilled. "I remember." "I was annoyed at the time, thought you were being petty." She picked at my comforter. "But it was good. You were good, setting that boundary. It was just a pen. No, it wasn't. It was you figuring out how to say no, and I needed to learn to hear it." She looked up at me. "I took a lot of your things, didn't I, in the past, before you changed, sometimes, more than sometimes. I never really thought about it. You were always so accommodating." She paused. "I'm sorry for not noticing, for not asking." "Thank you," I said. She nodded and stood up, paused at the door. "This version of you, the one who takes up space, she's better, happier. I'm glad you found her." After she left, I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the Montblanc. I'd kept it hidden all these years, using it only in private for the words that mattered most. A talisman of the life I'd lost and reclaimed. I packed it carefully in my carry-on. The flight to my new life was long. I spent most of it looking out the window, watching the ground fall away. When the flight attendant came by with drinks, I pulled down my tray table and set out my journal. I uncapped the Montblanc and put the nib to paper. The woman in the seat next to me glanced over. "That's a beautiful pen." "Thank you," I said. "It's my favourite." "Looks expensive." "It is." I started writing, the familiar, perfect flow of ink. "I saved for a long time to buy it." She nodded appreciatively and went back to her magazine. I wrote about rebirth, about second chances, about learning that sometimes the most important thing you can do is protect what matters to you, even if it's just a pen. Especially if it's just a pen. Because it's never really about the object. It's about knowing your worth. It's about understanding that you don't have to give everything away to prove you're generous, don't have to shrink yourself to make others comfortable, don't have to accept less because someone tells you that you should. The semester started with all the chaos of freshman orientation. New faces, new buildings, doings, new routines. I decorated my dorm room carefully, setting my desk up just the way I liked it. The Montblanc had its own holder now, a simple wooden stand I'd bought specifically for it. It sat next to the Lamy safari I used for everyday tasks. My roommate, a girl named Julia from Seattle, noticed them immediately. "Wow, is that a Montblanc?" "Yes. My dad has one. Those are serious pens." She grinned. "I'm more of a laptop girl myself, but I respect the dedication." "Writing by hand feels different," I said. "More intentional." "Can I try it sometime?" "Probably not," I said pleasantly. I'm weird about my pens, she laughed. Fair enough. I'm weird about my headphones. We all have our things. And just like that, it was understood. Boundaries without drama, respect without explanation. I joined the Creative Writing Club in September. Started submitting to the campus literary magazine in October. By November, I'd had 2 poems accepted for publication. By December, I'd been asked to read at the Winter Showcase. I called home to tell them. Mum answered, "That's wonderful, honey," she said, and I could hear actual warmth in her voice. "Your father will be so proud. Elena too. David has been telling everyone his sister is a published poet. It's just the campus magazine. It still counts. We're proud of you, Olivia." I felt the words settle into me, filling places that had been empty my entire first life. "How is everyone?" "Good. Busy. Elena's drowning in LSAT prep, but you know her. David made the basketball team. Your father and I are planning to visit next month for Parents' Weekend." "You are?" "Of course. We want to see your campus, meet your friends. Maybe you can show us that coffee shop you mentioned." In my first life, they'd never visited. They'd said it was too far, too expensive, too complicated. Elena had needed help with something. David had a game. There was always a reason. "I'd love that," I said. That night, I wrote a new poem. Not about pain or betrayal or loss, but about metamorphosis. About the quiet power of choosing yourself. About gold ink on white paper and the weight of words that finally belong to you. I used the Montblanc, of course. The nib moved across the page with that perfect resistance, that gentle scratch that was almost like a voice. My voice, clear and steady and entirely my own. When I finished, I read it over, changed a word, adjusted a line break, read it again. It was good, not perfect, but honest. And that felt like enough. Parents' Weekend came. Mum and Dad arrived Friday afternoon, and I showed them everything. My dorm, my classes, the library where I studied, the coffee shop where I wrote. They met Julia, who charmed them with stories about our late-night philosophical debates. They met my writing professor, who told them I had real talent. At dinner, Dad asked about my plans. Not in the vague, polite way he used to, but with genuine interest. "I'm thinking about applying for a summer program. Study abroad, creative writing focus." "Where?" Mum asked. "Italy, Florence." "That sounds amazing," Dad said. "Expensive?" "There's financial aid. I'd need to apply for additional scholarships, but think I have a good shot." "We could help," Mum said. "If you get in, consider it an investment in your future." I looked at her, at the sincerity in her face, at this version of my mother who saw me, who valued what I valued, who wanted to support my dreams instead of steering me towards safer, smaller ones. "Thank you," I said. That night, back in my dorm, I pulled out my journal and wrote about the weekend, about seeing my parents see me, about this life I'd built from the ashes of the first one boundary at a time, one choice at a time, one small act of self-preservation at a time. And I wrote about the pen, the one Elena had taken in my first life, that I'd hidden in my second, the one that represented everything I'd learned about worth and ownership and the right to protect what matters. I capped the Montblanc and set it on its stand. Tomorrow, I'd workshop my new poem. Tomorrow, I'd submit my application for the Italy program. Tomorrow, I'd keep building this life I'd chosen, one word at a time. But tonight, I just sat at my desk and felt the stillness. The kind of stillness that comes after a storm, after you've weathered something and survived it and come out changed, after you've learned that the world doesn't owe you fairness, but you owe yourself protection, after you've discovered that your worth isn't determined by how much you give away, but by how clearly you understand what you're worth keeping. My phone buzzed, a text from Elena. "Miss you. Law school is kicking my ass. How do you make time for yourself when everything feels important? I smiled and typed back, you learn to protect your time the same way you protect anything else valuable. You say no to things that don't serve you. You save space for what matters. Her response came quickly. When did you get so wise? When I learned what it cost not to be. A pause. Then, I'm glad you're happy, Liv. Really glad. I looked at the Montblanc on its stand, gleaming under my desk lamp. In the first version of my life, Elena had taken it and lost it, and I'd felt that loss like a theft of something deeper than a pen. In this version, I'd kept it safe, and she'd learned to respect that. And somehow, that small difference had changed everything. Not because the pen itself mattered so much, but because it had taught me that I could hold on to things, that I could say, this is mine, and mean it, that I could exist in the world as someone who takes up space, who has boundaries, who deserves care. The winter showcase arrived. I stood on stage in the campus theatre and read my poem about metamorphosis to a room full of strangers and friends. Julia sat in the front row. My writing professor nodded along, and when I finished, the applause felt real and earned. Afterward, people came up to talk to me about the poem, about my other work, about collaboration and publication, and all the possibilities that opened up when you let yourself be seen. I walked back to my dorm that night, with my hands in my pockets, the cold air sharp and clean. Above me, stars. Around me, the quiet campus. Inside me, peace. In my room, I pulled out my journal one more time. Today, I am 18 years old in a life I've lived twice. The first time, I gave everything away until there was nothing left. The second time, I learned to keep what matters. Elena asked me once what changed. I told her I learned to say no. But that's not quite it. What I really learned was to say yes to myself, to my own worth, to the idea that I deserve to protect the things I love. The pen on my desk cost 3 months of allowance when I was 14. It writes like silk and weighs almost nothing and holds ink the colour of old gold. I have other pens now, some cheaper, some more practical. But this one is still my favourite. Not because it's expensive, not because it's beautiful, but because it taught me that some things are worth keeping. That saying, this is mine, isn't selfish. That boundaries aren't walls. They're definitions. They're how we tell the world where we end and everything else begins. In my first life, I lost this pen and never got it back. In this life, I kept it. And that has made all the difference. I closed the journal and turned off the lamp, lay in bed and listened to Julia's quiet breathing from across the room. The heating system humming, the distant sound of someone's music muffled through walls. All of it new, all of it mine. I thought about Elena back home, stressed and studying, but texting me for advice. I thought about David, who video called me twice a week to tell me about his life. I thought about Mum and Dad, who were planning another visit in spring. I thought about the girl I'd been at 14, the one who would have given away anything to feel loved, and the girl I'd become at 18, the one who understood that love without respect isn't really love at all. Somewhere between those two versions of myself, I'd found the person I actually was, and she was someone worth protecting. The last thing I remembered before sleep took me was the feeling of the Montblanc in my hand, the way it balanced perfectly, the way it made me feel competent and careful and sure. In the morning, I would use it to write. In the afternoon, I would use it to create. In the evening, I would use it to document this strange and precious second chance I'd been given. But for now, I just slept, dreamless and deep and entirely at peace. Because I had learned the most important lesson, that you can't pour from an empty cup, can't give what you don't have, can't love others well if you don't love yourself first. And loving yourself sometimes looks like hiding a pen in a drawer. Sometimes it looks like saying no to your sister. Sometimes it looks like moving 8 states away to become someone new. And sometimes it looks like sitting at a desk with a pen that nobody can take away, writing your own story in gold ink. I had taken my life back, one small boundary at a time, and the pen I'd once lost and then reclaimed had been the first step on that journey. Not because it was magic, but because it was mine.